So a lot of people have questions on how to use glide baits. It's a reactionary bite where you're basically just trying to trigger a strike. And here's, I guess, how I want you to try to wrap your head around this as far as just what I've been able to learn from fishing with a lot of great anglers and then watching fish on forward-facing sonar. So there's several different baits that fall in this category. You've got your jigging raps, which you've probably heard of, your puppet minnows, your tikka minnows. This is the pitching puppet where it's got no nose hook and a little bit more exaggerated tail fin. Great for casting, gives the bait a little bit more glide. You've got your shadow wraps, you've got your Johnny darters. I mean, there's a wide range of baits that all fall in that same general category. It doesn't matter what kind of bait you're using. The biggest thing is that when you're casting these baits, you really have to snap them to get that bait to come up off the bottom and then glide back down. And what happens is these fish chase it as it glides back down. They're basically pinning that bait into the bottom. And watching these fish on forward-facing sonar, a lot of times these fish might position up off the bottom a little higher than what we might have envisioned even by looking at them with 2D sonar. And so say if you have fish that are positioned maybe a foot off the bottom, and if you're just creeping and hopping and popping and dragging a jig through them, those fish are going to see it. Sometimes, however, those fish are 2-3 feet off the bottom or more. And you're basically fishing below the fish in the sense that those fish would eat whatever you're using, but they're not seeing it. And so with the glide baits, what happens is that you're popping that bait up where it comes into their line of sight, and then they chase it down to the bottom. And the thing to remember is that as long as you get in front of the fish where they can see it, chasing a bait fish down and pinning it to the bottom is something these fish are very tuned into doing, and that's why these glide baits work so well at times. And so in a lot of cases, I would say 90% of your bites happen when this bait hits the bottom and they pin it in the bottom, and when you snap that rod tip again on the next snap, that's when you hook up. And so it's a very effective and fun way to catch fish. And so one final important tip when you're working these baits, when you snap that rod up, you get that bait to snap up, these baits have to fall on slack line. They have to fall down on slack line. And so that's why I like to put a swivel above the bait. That way you don't get the line wrapping around the rod tip when you chase that bait down. So snap up, bring that rod tip down so that these can fall on slack line. And when you pop it back up again, that's when you're going to know whether there's a fish there. Sometimes I'll feather it down on the bottom. You can feel the tick. Sometimes I'll lift up and shake the lure before I snap it to feel if there's a fish there. And so those are a couple of modifications that I make at times when I'm fishing these baits. But it's a very aggressive snap, reel down, snap, reel down. With a lot of experimentation and variation that can go into that basic program, but that's the basics for catching fish on glide baits.